Jake Harrison walked slowly through the giant crystal doors of the Galaxy Council building. His black suit was perfectly clean, but his face looked tired. He had been Earth's main diplomat for 15 years. Today would be his last day doing this job. The council meeting room was huge. It could hold thousands of aliens from different worlds. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see the top. Giant screens showed pictures of all the different alien species that belonged to the council. There were 847 different types of aliens in the room today. Jake's shoes made soft sounds on the smooth floor as he walked to the center speaking area. All around him, aliens of every shape and size watched him carefully. Some looked like giant insects. Others looked like walking trees. Some glowed with their own light. A few looked almost human, but with strange colored skin or extra arms. The Zephyrian Council speaker was named Veltar. He looked like a huge praying mantis, but he was green and had 4 arms instead of 2. His big eyes followed Jake as the human walked to the speaking platform. Veltar's mouth parts clicked together quickly. Jake knew this meant the alien was nervous. Honored members of the Galaxy Council, Jake began. His voice was calm and clear. The translation machines around the room quickly changed his words into hundreds of different alien languages. I speak today for all humans and for Earth. The room became very quiet. Even the aliens who usually made noise with their breathing or clicking stopped. Jake looked around at all the strange faces watching him. For 30 years, humans have worked with the Galaxy Council. We have helped solve fights between different worlds. We have shared our knowledge of medicine and science. We have built trade routes that connect distant planets. We have always tried to help when the Council asked us to. Some of the aliens nodded. Others made sounds that meant they agreed. The bird-like aviarians chirped softly. The rock people called lithoids made deep rumbling sounds. Jake's voice got a little harder. 3 months ago, we came to you with proof that the Klexan Empire was making slaves of the Marathi people. We showed you pictures of Marathi children forced to work in dangerous mines. We brought recordings of Marathi parents crying for their stolen babies. The room was still very quiet, but now it felt different. Some aliens looked down at the floor. Others shifted in their seats. Dr. Lisa Morgan, our best alien life expert, came here 6 times. She brought more and more proof each time. She showed you that millions of peaceful Marathi were being hurt and killed. She asked the council to help them. Jake paused and looked directly at Veltar. What did the council do? You formed a committee. Then you formed another committee to watch the first committee. Then you said you needed more time to study the problem. You said maybe in 5 or 10 years you might decide what to do. Now some aliens were making angry sounds. But Jake knew they were not angry at him. They were angry because they knew he was right. While your committees had meetings, 50,000 more Marathi died in Klexan slave camps. While you studied the problem, entire Marathi cities were emptied of their people. While you talked about maybe helping someday, a whole species was being destroyed. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and huge screens around the room showed pictures of Marathi slave camps. The images were terrible. Small furry creatures that looked a bit like Earth's otters were chained together, working in dark tunnels. Many looked sick and thin. Some aliens in the room made sounds of horror. A few of the more emotional species started crying. But the council leaders just sat still and said nothing. Yesterday, the last free Marathi city fell to Klexan forces, Jake said. There are now no free Marathi left in the galaxy. A species that had art, music, and poetry for thousands of years is now completely enslaved. This happened while the Galaxy Council did nothing. Jake turned off the pictures and put the device away. He stood up straight and looked around the room one more time. The people of Earth have made a decision. We cannot be part of a group that watches genocide happen and does nothing. We cannot pretend that committees and studies matter more than saving lives. We cannot be friends with people who care more about politics than about stopping evil. The room erupted in noise. Aliens were clicking, chirping, roaring, and making all kinds of sounds. Some were trying to talk to each other. Others were shouting questions at Jake, but he held up his hand and slowly the room got quiet again. The Terran Federation officially ends all diplomatic relations with the Galaxy Council, starting right now. We are taking our diplomats, our scientists, our doctors, and our trade ships away from all Council operations. We will no longer attend Council meetings. We will no longer follow Council laws. We will no longer help the Council with anything. Veltar stood up quickly, his 4 arms waving in panic. Ambassador Harrison, please, you cannot do this. The Council needs humanity. We can discuss the Marathi situation further. Jake looked at the giant mantis alien with sad eyes. Veltar, 3 months ago you could have saved the Marathi with 1 vote. Today there are no Marathi left to save. There is nothing left to discuss. He turned and started walking toward the exit. Behind him, the Council meeting room filled with chaos. Aliens were shouting at each other in hundreds of different languages. Some were demanding that Jake come back. Others were arguing about what to do next. As Jake reached the crystal doors, he heard Veltar calling over the noise. Where will humanity go? What will you do without the Council? Jake stopped and turned around one last time. His voice carried clearly over all the alien voices. We will do what we should have done from the beginning. We will help people who need help, whether you approve or not. We will stop evil when we find it, whether you like it or not. We will be the humans we were meant to be. The crystal doors closed behind Jake Harrison with a soft sound. Inside the Council building, 8947 alien species began to realize that their galaxy was about to change forever. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. On space stations, alien news reporters spoke in worried voices about humanity's sudden departure from the Galaxy Council. On trade worlds, business owners watched their communication screens with growing fear. On peaceful planets, ordinary alien families wondered what would happen next. Sam Rodriguez stood in the control room of the biggest terraforming station in the Vega system. Through the huge windows, he could see the planet below slowly turning from brown to green. For 8 years, his team of human engineers had been changing this dead world into a place where the Centauri people could live safely. Sam, we just got the order from Earth, said his assistant, Maria Santos. She held a communication device in her shaking hands. We have to shut down all operations and come home immediately. Sam looked at the planet one more time. In 6 more months, it would have been ready for the Centauri families waiting to move there. Now those families would have to find somewhere else to live or wait for someone else to finish the job. How many projects are we leaving behind? Sam asked. Maria checked her computer. 43 terraforming operations across the galaxy. 12 different alien species were depending on us to make their new worlds livable. Sam nodded sadly and pressed the emergency shutdown button. All across the planet below, the huge machines that cleaned the air and planted new forests began to turn off. The dream of a new Centauri homeworld died with the silence of the machines. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Medical Research Station near the Andromeda border, Dr. Amy Foster was having the worst day of her career. Her communication system had not stopped ringing since the news about humanity's withdrawal reached the medical community. Dr. Foster, please, you cannot leave now. The voice belonged to Dr. Zexthul, a spider-like alien from the Arachnid Collective. My people are dying from the bone rot disease. Only your human medicine can save them. Amy looked at the list of requests on her screen. 17 different alien species were begging her to stay. The crystalline entities needed human help to fix their broken mineral structures. The gas cloud beings required human technology to stop their young from dissolving into space. The plant people depended on human fertilizers to keep their children healthy. I am sorry, Dr. Zexthul, Amy said. The order comes from Earth's government. All human medical staff must return home immediately. We will try to train your doctors to use our medicines before we leave. But there is not much time. Dr. Zexthul made a sound like breaking glass, which meant he was crying. But training takes years. My people will die while we learn. Amy felt terrible, but she could not disobey orders from Earth. She began packing her research notes and medicine samples. Around her, alien doctors from dozens of species watched with desperate eyes. On the busy trade world of Nexus Prime, Danny Wright was shutting down the largest shipping operation in the galaxy. For 20 years, his company had moved goods between planets that other species thought were too far apart or too dangerous to reach. "Danny, what are we supposed to do now?" asked Captain Elena Vasquez. She had been running supply ships to the Outer Rim colonies for 15 years. Half the planets out there only get food and medicine because of our routes. Danny looked at his shipping charts. Red lines showed all the trade routes that would close when the humans left. Some alien worlds would not get supplies for months. Others might not get supplies at all. "The Altair mining colonies will run out of food in 3 weeks," Danny said. "The Kepler medical stations will run out of medicine in 2 months. The Frontier Research Post will run out of everything in 6 weeks. Elena shook her head. "Why did not the other species learn to do this shipping themselves?" "Because we made it look easy," Danny replied. "We never told them how hard it really was to navigate through asteroid fields and hostile space. We just did the job and made sure everyone got what they needed." The communication system beeped with another urgent message. This one was from the Tau Ceti agriculture world. They needed human fertilizer shipments to feed their population of 2 billion aliens. Without the shipments, they would face starvation within months. Danny turned off the communication system. He could not bear to read any more desperate messages. Far away, on the diplomatic station near the galactic core, Ambassador Kate Miller was watching 30 years of peacework fall apart. She had been 3 days away from signing a treaty that would end the war between the Taldorian Republic and the Nexus Collective. The war had been going on for 50 years and had destroyed dozens of worlds. "Ambassador Miller, you cannot leave now," shouted General Korth of the Taldorian Republic. He was a large, bear-like alien with blue fur and sharp teeth. "We were so close to peace." Across the table, Admiral Scree of the Nexus Collective nodded agreement. She looked like a giant octopus with silver skin. "Without human mediators, we will never trust each other enough to stop fighting." Kate felt her heart breaking. She had spent 5 years bringing these two enemies together. They had finally started to trust each other, but only because they both trusted her. Without a human mediator, they would probably start fighting again within days. "I am truly sorry," Kate said, "but Earth has made its decision. Perhaps you can find other mediators to help you." General Korth laughed bitterly. "Other mediators? The Zephyrians always take sides. The Altarians only care about money. The crystalline entities cannot understand emotions. Only humans could see both sides of our conflict and help us find compromise." Back at the Galaxy Council building, chaos was spreading through every department. Council Speaker Veltar tried to run an emergency meeting, but without human translators, many species could not understand each other. Professor Steve Coleman had been the Council's chief language expert for 12 years. He spoke 43 different alien languages and understood the culture of over 200 species. When aliens had arguments based on misunderstandings, Steve would explain what each side really meant. Now Steve was gone, and the Council members were discovering how much they had depended on human cultural knowledge. The hive mind species could not understand why the individual-focused species wanted personal freedom. The warrior races could not understand why the peaceful species refused to fight even in self-defense. How did we not notice how much we needed them? Veltar asked his assistant, a small gray alien named Piptar. Piptar looked at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. "Because they made everything work so smoothly that we forgot they were doing it. They solved problems before we even knew the problems existed." Outside the council building, alien reporters from hundreds of news organizations were asking the same question. What would happen to the galaxy without humans? The answer was becoming clear with each passing hour. Trade routes were closing. Medical treatments were stopping. Peace negotiations were failing. Scientific research was slowing down. The galaxy was learning a terrible lesson. For 30 years, humans had been the invisible foundation that held galactic civilization together. Now that foundation was gone, and everything was starting to fall apart. In the space between stars, human ships were gathering for the journey home. As they prepared to leave, the aliens they left behind were just beginning to understand how much they had lost. 3 weeks after humanity left the Galaxy Council, the economic reports were worse than anyone had imagined. Economic Coordinator Zeflin sat in her office on the Council space station, staring at numbers that made no sense. The Altarian looked like a tall, thin humanoid with blue skin and 4 arms. Right now, all 4 of her hands were shaking as she read the data. 37%, she whispered to herself. Galactic economic activity has dropped by 37% in just 3 weeks. Her assistant, a small furry creature named Blix, brought her more reports. It gets worse, Coordinator. The Outer Rim territories are reporting complete supply chain collapse. Without human shipping, some worlds will run out of food within days. Zeflin stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see the massive space station that served as the Council's headquarters. Usually hundreds of ships came and went every hour, carrying diplomats, traders, and supplies. Today she could count the ships on her fingers. How did we let this happen, she asked. How did we become so dependent on one species? Blix checked his datapad. Because they were really good at everything, and they never complained about doing the hard jobs that other species did not want to do. That same day, Council Speaker Veltar called an emergency meeting of the Council's top leaders. 12 of the most powerful aliens in the galaxy gathered in the Speaker's private conference room. The mood was dark. We need to bring the humans back, announced Admiral Krextar of the Draconian Fleet. He was a large lizard-like alien with red scales and sharp teeth. My fleets cannot coordinate properly without human tactical advisors. We are defenseless. The medical situation is even worse, added Chief Medical Officer Threll Lynn. She was a plant-like being with green skin and leaves instead of hair. 17. Species are facing health crises that only human medicine can solve. Millions will die if we do not act quickly. Veltar clicked his mandibles nervously. What do you suggest we do? The humans made their position very clear. They will not work with us as long as we do nothing about the Marathi situation. Then, we do something about the Marathi, said Admiral Krextar. We send fleets to attack the Klexon Empire and free the Marathi slaves. The room fell silent. Everyone knew this was easier said than done. The Klexon Empire was one of the strongest military powers in the galaxy. A war with them would cost millions of lives and might last for decades. We should try diplomacy first, suggested Senior Arbiter Cassandra. She was an elegant alien who looked like a combination of an elf and a butterfly, with thin wings and pointed ears. Let me lead a delegation to Earth. Perhaps we can negotiate a compromise. Veltar agreed. Within hours, the fastest council ship was racing toward the solar system, carrying a delegation of the galaxy's most important leaders. When they arrived, at Earth, the council delegation was shocked by what they found. The human homeworld was busier than ever. New ships were being built in the orbital shipyards. Military vessels that had been in storage were being repaired and upgraded. It looked like humanity was preparing for something big. Secretary of State Helen Brooks met the delegation at the main diplomatic center in Geneva. Helen was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but today she looked tired and stressed. Welcome to Earth, Helen said politely. I assume you are here to discuss our withdrawal from the Council. Cassandra spoke for the delegation. Secretary Brooks, the galaxy is in crisis. Billions of beings are suffering because of humanity's absence. Surely we can find a way to work together again. Helen gestured for them to sit down in the conference room. Through the windows, the aliens could see human news broadcasts showing images of something called Operation Sanctuary. Perhaps you should see what we have been doing since we left the Council, Helen said. She turned on a large screen that showed footage of human fleets in space. The delegation watched in amazement as human ships rescued groups of small, furry aliens from heavily guarded prison planets. The aliens being rescued looked like the Marathi, but the council members had been told that all Marathi were enslaved or dead. We found them, Helen explained. Secret Klexon slave camps that your intelligence services somehow missed. In the past 3 weeks, we have freed over 2 million Marathi from dozens of hidden facilities. Commander Nick Torres appeared on the screen, giving a briefing from the bridge of his ship. He was a young man with short dark hair and determined eyes. Operation Sanctuary has been a complete success. We have not only freed the Marathi slaves, but we have also discovered that the Klexon Empire has been enslaving 15 other species that the Galaxy Council never knew existed. The delegation members looked at each other in shock. Admiral Krextar leaned forward. 15 other species, how is that possible? Helen switched the screen to show refugee camps on newly established human colony worlds. Aliens of many different types were working together to build new homes. Human doctors and engineers moved among them, providing medical care and technical assistance. While your council held committee meetings, we sent scout ships to investigate the Klexon Empire properly. Helen continued. We found that they have been systematically enslaving any species they consider weak or useful. The Marathi were just the most recent victims. Dr. Alan Price, Earth's lead xenobiologist, joined the meeting. He was an older man with a beard and glasses who looked very serious. We have identified over 200 sentient species that exist in this galaxy, but are not members of your council. Most of them are too primitive by your standards, or live in areas you consider unimportant. That is impossible, protested Cassandra. Our survey teams have mapped the entire galaxy. Dr. Price smiled sadly. Your survey teams look for advanced technology and valuable resources. They ignore planets with simple life forms or harsh environments. We look for intelligence and consciousness, regardless of technology level. Helen stood up and walked to the window. While you argued about proper procedures for helping the Marathi, we were already building relationships with all these overlooked species. They are grateful for our friendship because no one else has ever offered it. The screen now showed human teachers working with alien children of many different species. Human farmers were sharing crop techniques with plant-like aliens. Human artists were learning music from creatures that communicated through color changes. You want to know what humanity has been doing since we left the council? Helen asked. We have been doing what we should have been doing all along. We help anyone who needs help. Without waiting for committee approval, we protect the weak from the strong. Without worrying about political consequences, we treat every intelligent being as worthy of respect, regardless of their technology or usefulness. Captain Lucy Martinez appeared on the screen next, reporting from a liberated Klexon facility. The Klexon Empire has responded to our liberation operations by declaring war on humanity. They seem to think we will be easy targets without council support. The camera showed the wreckage of Klexon warships floating in space around a rescued slave world. Human ships moved through the debris, checking for survivors to rescue. They were wrong, Captain Martinez continued with a slight smile. Cassandra and the other delegation members realized they were looking at a completely different humanity than the one they had known in the council. These humans were not asking for permission or following diplomatic protocols. They were acting with the confidence of people who knew they were doing the right thing. What do you want from us? Veltar asked quietly. Helen turned back to face the delegation. We want you to understand that the galaxy is bigger than your council. There are billions of beings out there who need help, and most of them have never heard of your organization. We are going to help them whether you approve or not. And if we try to stop you? Admiral Krextar asked. Helen's expression became very serious. Then you will discover that the humans who served as your diplomats and peacekeepers for 30 years are the same humans who are currently dismantling the Klexon Empire piece by piece. We prefer to solve problems with words, but we are very good at solving them with actions when necessary. The council delegation left Earth that day with much to think about. They had come hoping to convince humanity to return to their old role as helpful servants of galactic order. Instead, they had discovered that humanity was creating a new order entirely, and they were not asking anyone's permission to do it. 6 months had passed since humanity left the Galaxy Council, and the galaxy was learning what it meant to fear humans instead of depending on them. The first lesson came when the Void Plague struck the core worlds without warning. Dr. Hexlin of the Crystalline Collective was the first to recognize the symptoms. Her people were made of living crystal, and the plague was turning their beautiful diamond bodies into dull gray stone. Within days, entire crystal cities were crumbling as their inhabitants lost the ability to maintain their crystalline structure. We need human medical expertise immediately, Dr. Hexlin transmitted to the Galaxy Council's Emergency Response Center. Our traditional healers have no knowledge of this disease. Only human medicine might be able to help us. Council Speaker Veltar tried to contact Earth's medical authorities, but the response he received was not what he expected. Dr. Carol Hughes, working from humanity's new independent research station, had indeed developed a cure for the void, plague. The message was simple and direct. "We have the cure," Dr. Hughes announced in a transmission to the affected worlds, "but we will not share it through Galaxy Council channels. Any world that needs the cure can contact us directly. We will provide it free of charge to any species that asks for our help, personally." Within hours, desperate crystal beings were bypassing the Galaxy Council entirely and contacting human medical stations directly. The cure worked perfectly, but the political message was clear. Humanity would help those who needed help, but only on their own terms. The Council leadership watched helplessly as their authority crumbled. Species that had always followed Council protocols were now ignoring them completely when their survival was at stake. The second major crisis came from the Outer Rim, where the Garthok Rebellion had exploded into full-scale warfare. The Garthoks were a warrior species that had been oppressed by the Council-backed hegemony government for over 100 years. Now they were fighting for their freedom, and the Council's peacekeeping force was supposed to stop them. General Pete Jackson had been the Council's chief military advisor for 20 years. Without him, the multi-species peacekeeping force was a disaster. The Altarian commanders could not understand the draconian battle tactics. The crystalline generals thought too slowly for fast-moving combat. The hive mind species could not adapt when their plans went wrong. Admiral Krextar led the Council fleet into the Garthok system, confident that their superior numbers would end the rebellion quickly. Instead, his forces were defeated in 3 separate battles by Garthok fighters, who seemed to know exactly what the Council forces would do before they did it. "How are they predicting our every move?" Admiral Krextar demanded during an emergency strategy meeting. The answer came from an unexpected source. A message arrived from the Garthok rebel leader, transmitted on all Council frequencies so everyone could hear it. "We thank our human military advisors for their excellent tactical guidance," the Garthok leader announced. "For too long, we suffered under Council oppression while you ignored our cries for justice. Now the humans have shown us how to fight effectively against forces much larger than our own." The Council leadership realized with horror that humanity was not just refusing to help them, they were actively helping their enemies. The humans had chosen a side, and it was not the Council's side. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Captain Susan Clark, formerly of the Council's Exploration Division, had been busy building something entirely new. She called it the Free Worlds Alliance, and it was growing faster than anyone had imagined possible. The alliance started small, with just the species that humans had liberated from Klexan slavery. But word spread quickly through the galaxy about a new political organization that actually cared about individual freedom and justice. Soon, entire Council member species were secretly talking about joining the alliance instead. The Benthic Collective was the first major Council species to officially leave. They were peaceful ocean dwellers who had grown tired of Council policies that favored land-based species. When they announced their departure to join the Free Worlds Alliance, it sent shockwaves through the Council leadership. "The Benthics have been Council members for over 200 years, Veltar said in disbelief. "Why would they leave now?" The answer came in a public statement from the Benthic leadership. "The Free Worlds Alliance treats us as equals, not as junior partners. They ask for our opinions and actually listen to our answers. The Galaxy Council has taken our loyalty for granted for too long." Within weeks, 12 more species had left the Council to join the Alliance. Each departure weakened the Council's power and strengthened humanity's new organization. Meanwhile, the Klexan Empire was learning the hard way that enslaving species, protected by humans, was a very bad idea. Admiral Frank Torres had been a quiet logistics officer during his time with the Council. Now he was systematically destroying the Klexan war machine with surgical precision. The Klexans had expected to fight a traditional war against human fleets. Instead, they found their supply lines cut, their communication networks jammed, and their slave camps liberated before they even knew humans were in the area. How are they moving so fast? Emperor Klexmore demanded from his heavily defended capital world. Our sensors show human ships in 6 different systems at the same time. His military advisors had no good answers. Human tactics were unlike anything they had seen before. The humans did not try to conquer Klexon worlds or destroy their cities. Instead, they focused entirely on freeing slaves and destroying the infrastructure that supported the slave trade. Within 3 months of declaring war on humanity, the Klexon Empire had lost over half of their slave-based economy. Worse, many of the freed slaves were joining human fleets as volunteers, giving the humans inside knowledge of Klexon military secrets. The final shock came when the humans revealed the true scope of their new alliance. Dr. Tony Rodriguez, now head of the Galactic Health Initiative, held a press conference that was broadcast across the galaxy. The Free Worlds Alliance now includes over 400 sentient species, he announced. Most of these species were never members of the Galaxy Council because the Council considered them too primitive or too unimportant to notice. The screen behind him showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked Council member worlds, while blue dots marked Alliance members. There were far more blue dots than red ones. We have established trade networks that connect worlds the Council never bothered to contact. We have shared medical knowledge that has eliminated diseases the Council never knew existed. We have created defensive agreements that protect species the Council considered too weak to matter. Dr. Rodriguez paused and looked directly into the camera. The Galaxy Council represents about 250 species in the inner systems. The Free Worlds Alliance represents over 400 species spread across the entire galaxy. We are not trying to replace the Council. We have already replaced it. Back on the Council station, the leadership finally understood what had happened. They had not just lost humanity's services. They had lost their claim to represent galactic civilization. While they had been focused on maintaining their existing power structure, humans had been building a new one that was bigger, more inclusive, and more effective. Veltar called an emergency session of the remaining Council members. Only 237 species attended. The others had either joined the Alliance or were seriously considering it. "What do we do now?" asked Economic Coordinator Zeflin. The question hung in the air without an answer. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was no longer the most important political organization in the galaxy. They had become irrelevant, and everyone knew it. Outside the Council chambers, alien reporters were asking a new question. How long before the Galaxy Council collapsed completely? The Free Worlds Alliance was offering everything the Council offered, plus actual effectiveness and moral leadership. The galaxy was learning to fear humanity not because humans were cruel or aggressive, but because they were competent and principled. When humans decided something needed to be done, it got done quickly and thoroughly. When humans decided someone needed to be stopped, they got stopped. The Galaxy Council had spent centuries believing that political procedure was more important than moral action. Now they were discovering that the galaxy did not actually need their procedures as much as it needed someone willing to do what was right. 1 year after humanity's dramatic exit from the Galaxy Council, President Maria Santos stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The room was packed not just with human delegates, but with representatives from hundreds of alien species. The Free Worlds Alliance had grown so large that Earth's biggest meeting hall could barely hold everyone. Fellow beings of the galaxy, President Santos began, her voice carried by translators to species across dozens of worlds. Today we establish a new foundation for galactic civilization. We call it the Terra Doctrine. Outside the building, alien news crews from across the galaxy waited to hear humanity's plan for the future. The Galaxy Council had become so weak that even their own member species were more interested in what humans had to say than in Council announcements. The Terra Doctrine was simple, but revolutionary. Any species that wanted help would get it, regardless of their technology level or political importance. Any species that oppressed others would face consequences, regardless of their military power or economic influence. Every intelligent being deserved the same basic rights, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. President Santos explained how this would work in practice. We will not ask permission to help people who need help. We will not wait for committee approval to stop injustice. We will not ignore suffering because it is politically inconvenient. The results of this new approach were already visible across the galaxy. Dr. Tony Rodriguez, now head of the Galactic Health Initiative, reported that disease outbreaks that used to kill millions were now stopped within days. Human medical teams could reach any crisis zone immediately because they did not need to wait for diplomatic clearance from local governments. In the past year, we have prevented 14 major epidemics and eliminated 6 diseases completely, Dr. Rodriguez announced. We have done this by treating medical emergencies as medical emergencies, not as political problems that require months of negotiation. The transformation was most obvious in the former Council territories. Species that had spent centuries following Council rules were now adopting human ideas about individual freedom and democratic government. The Benthic Collective had held their first free elections in over 1,000 years. The crystalline entities had established courts to protect the rights of individual crystals instead of just the collective mind. Even more surprising, many of these species were becoming better at solving problems than they had ever been under Council leadership. The plant-like Verdians had developed new farming techniques that could feed twice as many people. The insect-like Skrull had created new manufacturing methods that produced goods faster and cheaper than ever before. When people are free to think for themselves, they think of amazing things, explained Dr. Rachel Wright, humanity's new head of cultural development. The Council system taught aliens to wait for instructions from above. Our system teaches them to solve problems themselves. But the most dramatic change was happening in space itself. Captain Roy Baker stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching as former enemies worked together to build a new trade station. Klexan engineers, freed from their empire's slave-based economy, were working alongside Marathi architects to design a facility that would serve dozens of species. 6 months ago, these two groups were at war, Captain Baker reported to Earth Command. Today, they are partners. The Klexans are actually better engineers when they are not spending all their time managing slaves. The Marathi are brilliant designers when they are not living in fear. The Klexan Empire itself had collapsed almost completely. Without slave labor to support their economy, and with their military forces defeated by human tactics, the empire had broken apart into dozens of smaller governments. Most of these new Klexan nations had immediately applied to join the Free World's Alliance. We were wrong, admitted former Emperor Klexmore in a public statement. We thought strength came from dominating others. The humans have shown us that real strength comes from cooperation and mutual respect. Meanwhile, the Galaxy Council was facing its own final crisis. Only 187 species remained as active council members. The rest had either joined the Free World's Alliance or had simply stopped participating in council activities. Council. Speaker Veltar called what everyone knew would be the last regular council session. The great crystal amphitheater that had once held nearly 1,000 different species now looked almost empty with fewer than 200 delegations present. The Galaxy Council faces an existential choice, Veltar announced to the sparse assembly. We can continue as we are and become completely irrelevant, or we can adapt to the new galactic reality. The debate that followed was painful but honest. Species after species stood up to explain why they were considering leaving the council. The complaints were always the same: too much bureaucracy, too little action, too much politics, too little justice. The Free World's Alliance actually does things, said Ambassador Crix of the Methane Breathers. When we have a problem, they solve it. When we have an idea, they listen to it. When we need help, they provide it. The final moment came when Admiral Krextar, the Council's top military commander, made an unexpected announcement. I am resigning from the Council Defense Force to join the Free World's Alliance, he declared. I became a soldier to protect innocent people from those who would harm them. The Alliance is actually doing that job, the Council is not. 3 days later, Veltar himself made the decision that officially ended the Galaxy Council as a major political force. He sent a formal request to Earth, asking for the Council to be admitted to the Free World's Alliance as a member organization. Jake Harrison, the same human diplomat who had announced humanity's withdrawal 1 year earlier, received the request in his new office as Alliance coordinator. The irony was not lost on him. The organization that had once dismissed human concerns about justice and morality was now begging to join the human-led alliance. But Jake's response surprised everyone, including himself. The Free Worlds Alliance welcomes any organization committed to the principles of individual liberty, mutual cooperation, and protection of the innocent, he announced. This includes the Galaxy Council, if they are truly ready to embrace these principles instead of just talking about them. The conditions were simple but firm. The Council would have to abandon their committee-based decision-making in favor of direct action when people needed help. They would have to treat all species as equals instead of favoring the powerful. They would have to put moral principles ahead of political convenience. Most importantly, they would have to accept that they were joining the alliance, not leading it. Humanity had proven that they were better at galactic leadership than anyone else, and the other species were finally ready to admit it. The ceremony took place 1 year to the day after Jake Harrison had walked out of the council chambers. This time, he walked back in as the representative of the most powerful political organization in galactic history. The Free Worlds Alliance now included over 600 species, controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes, and commanded the respect of every intelligent being who valued freedom and justice. Veltar approached Jake with something that looked like humility. The proud mantis alien who had once dismissed human concerns now spoke with the voice of someone who had learned a hard lesson. Ambassador Harrison, the Galaxy Council formally requests admission to the Free Worlds Alliance. We understand that we will be junior members in an organization that we once thought we could ignore. We have learned that forms and procedures mean nothing if they do not serve justice and compassion. Jake looked around the crystal amphitheater that had once symbolized the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Now it seemed small and old-fashioned, compared to the dynamic, growing alliance that humanity had built from scratch. The alliance accepts your application, Jake replied. Welcome to a galaxy where doing the right thing matters more than following the right procedures. As he spoke these words, Jake realized that humanity had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not conquered the galaxy through force or trickery. They had not imposed their will through threats or manipulation. Instead, they had simply demonstrated a better way of living, and the galaxy had chosen to follow their example. The greatest human victory was not that they had defeated their enemies, but that they had turned their enemies into allies by showing them what true civilization looked like.